This is Curious Minnesota, a Star Tribune project that sends staff from the state's largest newsroom hunting for the answers to great questions we receive from you, our readers. We're here to answer everything you want to know about the state's people, places, and culture.
Welcome to Curious Minnesota. I'm your host, Erica Pearson. This episode of Curious Minnesota is sponsored by Primrose Schools and the Minnesota Historical Society. Today's show is about how a 13-ton piece of public art that no one wanted ended up finding a home. Called The Scroll, the sculpture once had a prominent spot in downtown Minneapolis in front of the old Central Library, where it stood for more than 4 decades. But when the library building was demolished to make way for a new one, the scroll sculpture almost ended up in a scrap heap. This question came to us from Joe Hoover, who was fond of the old library and the sculpture. He wrote to ask where it went. Thanks so much to Joe for this great question. I'm here today with Alicia Eler. She's the Minnesota Star Tribune's visual art reporter and critic. Alicia, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Erica.
So what intrigued you about this question?
Well, the first thing that intrigued me is that how does like a 13-ton sculpture just disappear? You know, like it's not like it can hide. It's huge. And it was in the front, you know, at the Minneapolis Central Library. What happened? How did it just disappear? And people were confused about that. So obviously you have to have some means of transporting it. So
yes, it's a mystery that like there could not be a trail.
Right. It doesn't just get up and walk away.
Yeah. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about the sculpture itself. Who was the artist?
The artist, his name was John Rood. He's a Minnesota-based sculptor. He was born in Ohio in like 1904. And he had planned to become a journalist, but the Department of Journalism head at University of Arkansas, where he was in school, introduced him to a wealthy family in Washington who then hired him as a secretary and travel companion on a trip to Europe. In the late 20s, he was in Europe, the rise of surrealism, avant-garde artists, Hemingway, Gertrude Stein. It changed his life, and he came back and he was working on a periodical called Manuscript, but he just became more interested in sculpture by 1933, and apparently it took off because by 1937 he had his first solo show in New York, and by 1944 he was teaching at the University of Minnesota. So he was working in wood, bronze, and metal, and he did have an interest in like religious subject matter and simplified animal forms. I wanted to read this quote I found from him that I thought was pretty nice on the website of the Wiseman Art Museum. He says, "Art for me has become a kind of religion, believing as I do that we should leave the world a better place for having lived in it. Also, the knowledge that I am part of the endless metamorphic chain, animal matter becoming dust again and dust nourishing at plants to be eaten and become a part of the animal world, including man himself, has cheered me, since it makes clear that I am brother not only to all other people, but to everything else in the world, rocks, trees, mountains, everything."
Yeah, I had never heard of him before we started looking into this question.
Me neither.
And I had not seen the artwork before either. What can you tell us about it? What did it look like, and what was he trying to convey?
So he was inspired by the mid-20th century discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is, you know, of course, an ancient collection of biblical and historical writings. And he had been working on that. And this scroll is like huge. It was like a kind of a metal framework. And then on top of that, he had 54 copper sheets. It stood 27 feet high, 22 feet wide. And then he pounded like the ancient writing designs into the copper using a technique called repoussé, which involves hammering the backside of a metal sheet. And they were covered in bronze and cast green on one side and reddish gold on the other. And he had been working on this scroll-themed piece, and then it sort of clicked that it would make sense for the library, since the library is, you know, where you house books and historical artifacts.
Yeah, got it. And he had a connection to the library too, right?
Yes, he did have a connection to the library. His wife, Dorothy Atkinson Rood, was president of the library's board when it commissioned the sculpture. So they donated the piece which is worth about $50,000 at the time.
Got it. So what did people in Minneapolis think about it? Was it popular to like go sit by the sculpture, take photos of it, or was it not so embraced?
Well, I wasn't alive at the time, so I can't tell you for sure if people were there.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, it was a beloved sculpture. It was sort of like a landmark. The guy who wrote in asking what happened to it, I can't figure it out. I remembered it from his childhood.
Yeah, and it was like right near a reflecting pool. Got it.
Yes.
All right, so let's fast forward to 2000. That's when Minneapolis voters approved the plans to build a new central library downtown, and that meant that the old building was set to be demolished. So then what was in the cards for the scroll?
So some of the other works from the old library did move, but not this one. The architecture firm that was hired to design the new library, Cesar Pelli and Associates, now Pelli, Clark and Partners, just didn't make sense for their new plan, and they said, we got to get rid of it.
Wow. And you found in your reporting an intriguing document. It was a report by the Minneapolis Arts Commission, and it talks all about the city's effort to figure out what to do with the sculpture when the architects had sort of rejected it. And one person you mentioned in your article even recommended demolishing it. So let's get into that after the break.
At Primrose, our balanced learning approach means exploring academic skills and life skills, combining purposeful play with nurturing guidance from teachers, and setting children up for success in future classrooms. Learn more at primroseschools.com/Twin Cities.
History doesn't only exist in the pages of a book. History exists all around us. You just have to dare to look. Listen to Minnesota Unraveled, a podcast from the Minnesota Historical Society. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
We're back. Okay, so why didn't the architects want to include this sculpture in the new building, and what else did you learn from this report?
Well, it was 2002 by then. The sculpture had been out there for over 40 years, and they ran a conservator's report, and the conservator found that there was visible corrosion, probably on the interior as well. It would have required more investigation by a sculptural engineer, art conservator, art moving contractor. Maybe some of the panels, the copper panels, would have had to be replaced. So there's a lot of conservation work that would have had to go into that. And then they were like, okay, well, if it's going to be deinstalled and moved, it needs to be reinstalled, reassembled, and restored. And it might also be damaged in the process. So many institutions were contacted to see if they would like the scroll. Minneapolis Institute of Art, Walker, Franconia, Minneapolis Park Board, Minneapolis Board of Education, General Mills Art Collection, and the Wiseman Art Museum. 3 of those institutions said they would take the sculpture if the library could pay the estimated costs. And those were the Minnesota State Fair, University of Minnesota Public Art Program, and the Western Sculpture Park in St. Paul. But they couldn't help with the financial assistance of moving the scroll. So, the money wasn't there for it. And then closest living relative, Rood died in 1974, I believe. And then his closest living relative was contacted, Mrs. Mary A. Mitchell of Connecticut, his stepdaughter, and they asked, what do you want to do with the scroll? And she wrote a letter in 2002 saying, whatever decision your architect comes to is certainly acceptable. So, it seemed like people were trying to move on from the scroll, and the architecture firm did not wish to incorporate the scroll into the new building. So this is all in the commissioner's report. So, yeah, it was just planned to be demolished and the metal be scrapped. It seemed to make the most sense because moving it would cost, rough estimates for total cost of this work are $63,000 to $87,000 for investigation, deinstall, moving, reinstall, reassembly, restoration. This was in 2002, so do the math. That's pretty expensive to move the sculpture.
Yeah. Oh, it's sad though. I feel like sorry for this artwork. Nobody wanted it. But then things did change. What happened?
Well, what happened was it was set to be demolished, and then kind of at the last minute, because it would cost like $87,000 at the time to transport it, had to have like a special cradle. It might be more damaged in the move. No one knew where to take it, blah, blah, blah. No one wanted it. And then out of nowhere, this guy, Von Veit, who is the owner of a specialty contracting and waste management company, Veit and FM Fratellone were on the site, and they were also working with Landwehr Construction, a St. Cloud-based company. So they were supposed to demolish it, but then he stepped in and was like, you know what, I'll take it to Veit's headquarters in Rogers.
Wow. And was he like a big art collector, or just this piece spoke to him?
You know, he did not respond for comment multiple times, but from a story I read, in 2003, apparently he told the Star Tribune that he's kind of a religious guy, from what I understand. And so the scrolls, made him think about God, and he felt there was value in installing the artwork as a kind of company symbol, since it was inspired by the Dead Sea Scrolls. And he said to the Star Tribune in 2003, I quote, "It's a reminder to our people of what it's all about, that God is the answer to everything in this world, and that we're only here for a very short time," end quote.
Got it.
And then it went up there, and I guess it only cost $15,000 to move and reinstall at Veit headquarters.
I mean, I guess if you have all the equipment yourself, then,
Right.
then it becomes easier. That's so interesting, though, that the like religious connection is what saved the scroll in the end. So you drove out to see it. Can you tell us what the experience was like, and how did it seem when you saw it?
I did. I drove out there. It's just straight up 94 to Rogers. And, I was thinking, I'll see it from the highway. It'll be this glorious thing. And I did see it from the highway. You could miss it if you weren't looking for it. I turned around and I got off the highway and drove into Veit headquarters. And it's really the first thing you see when you're driving down the road. You pass the scroll and then you are in the parking lot.
Huh.
So it did become like a symbol of the company. I don't know if they've restored it or done any work. They didn't get back to me about that. I did see some bird poop on it. So, but I imagine it's cleaned.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they did any restoration work. Since it was in front of the library for over 40 years, it was...
Yeah, it's been in the elements a long time.
Yeah. Because, at the Minneapolis Sculpture Garden, there are people who specifically are just there to touch up the sculptures and clean them. I mean, we see the Spoon Bridge and Cherry. I think it's every 10 years or so it's taken to get repainted. I mean, all those public artworks, especially, metal, needs to be restored frequently. So I have no idea what they've done to keep up the scroll.
Got it. But it's still there.
Still there.
You can drive and see it. If you're curious, after listening, you could drive and see it yourself. It's not in like an area that's gated off or anything like that. It's right at the...
I mean, it's private property. It's a company.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can just drive in. I didn't have any problems.
Okay. So did you get any comments that were intriguing or any feedback from readers after writing this one?
"I'm so grateful Mr. Veit saved our scroll," one reader writes. People are just happy the scroll was saved. Someone else says, "Hopefully he will take the monstrosity, which is now in front of the public library in downtown Minneapolis." I know that I wrote about that sculpture coming in maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that. The struggles are ongoing for public art downtown sometimes.
They are. This is a 10-ton sculpture. I guess the library likes having double-digit ton sculptures, and it's called Nimbus. It's a steel sculpture by Atlanta-based artist Tristan Al-Haddad. It was brought to Minneapolis in pieces, welded together, and it's sort of like a halo-like structure. It kind of creates like a small amphitheater-type situation, and there's like colored light that streams through, and there's a kind of like a benches, like a theater in the round sort of situation beneath it. So that was beautiful. It was installed, and then I remember the library and downtown. People, it's a place to sit. So a lot of unhoused people were, setting up there, or just resting there, or camping out. So then it became this sort of, the city was trying to not have unhoused people there, and then they sort of sectioned off there's like a gate or something.
Yeah, there's like these barricades,
so now
right?
you can't sit there. So it kind of like defeats the purpose of the sculpture. So people have had a lot of feelings about it.
Yeah, to be continued. Thank you so much for this story. I feel like a lot of people connected with this story because the artwork was almost like an underdog that no one wanted, but it's like a lost pet finding a home almost. But the artwork found its way to a spot. So there's a little bit. It's not like the happiest ending possible, but it's a happy ending for it. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I think as the arts reporter, I was most surprised that it didn't find a home in one of the many sculpture parks or public institutions so that was made me feel disappointed in the art community. Get it together, take this art.
It's a good point. Hopefully they're listening. All right. Well, that is it for today's show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you can read all of our Curious Minnesota stories online at startribune.com/curious. Thanks, as always, to Matt Gilmer for editing this podcast. And if you have some feedback or a question you'd like us to answer, you can send a note to curious@startribune.com.
Thanks for listening to Curious Minnesota. We want to hear from you. Ask questions and read more stories online at startribune.com/curious. Our show is recorded at the Star Tribune's headquarters in beautiful downtown Minneapolis, and our music is produced by Matt Gilmer. If you like the show, please rate us on iTunes or leave a review. And until next time, stay curious.